For those of you that didn't know, The Mortal Instruments is an apparently hugely popular YA urban fantasy series consisting of 6 books, first released in 2007 and finishing in 2014. It is a greater part of the Shadowhunters literary universe created by Cassandra Claire. As with most young adult fiction, this series is not necessarily intended for me, a 23-year-old man, and is rather geared towards a younger audience, likely predominantly made up of teenage girls. That's not to say that other people can't read this series and form an opinion on it, or that only teen girls would like it, but to acknowledge that I, or other similarly circumstanced individuals, probably weren't in mind while these books were being written. This is going to be a full spoiler review, so if you want to go read these books before watching this, go ahead, though if you are part of the intended audience for this series, I would suggest that you don't read it, either at all or at least until you have some information about its contents, which I will provide shortly. This series follows the exploits of Clarissa, I'm Not Like Other Girls Frey, almost universally referred to as Clary, and her gaggle of friends as they try to thwart the schemes of Valentine, who may as well be the half-angel version of a certain German dictator, and his son, Scene Kid Sebastian, who is what would happen if Satan and Mussolini had a child. That stuff kinda takes a back seat in the narrative though, because what the author is really interested in is telling the story of forbidden romance between Clary and Jace. So without further ado, let's discuss Part 1 of The Mortal Instruments, City of Bones.
What are you looking at?
The story opens with our main POV character, the series has multiple, going to an all-ages club with her childhood friend, Simon Lewis. I can't discuss the validity of such places in New York, I've never been there, especially not in 2007. While there, Simon starts giving off blatant I'm into you vibes to an oblivious Clary, who's too busy eyeing up a boy with black hair leading a girl with blue hair into an easily accessible and completely unlocked utility closet right next to the dance floor. This next bit just says stare sarcastically at camera. Raymond, we don't have a camera! Upon seeing 2 other people with knives enter the closet quickly after, Clary tells Simon to go get security and then, for some reason, goes to investigate on her own. I should note that this closet must be pretty big, because Clary is initially able to sneak in without the 4 other occupants noticing. Once there, she witnesses the grisly murder of the black-haired boy before his body disappears into nothing. The 3 killers drop that the boy was a demon, while at the same time being surprised Clary can see them. Almost to emphasize their point, Simon and a bouncer burst in and ask why Clary is standing there alone. Bewildered, she apologizes for causing a stir and then heads home. Once there, Clary's mother Jocelyn scolds her for coming home so late. The next day, Jocelyn tells her daughter that they'll be moving to her friend Luke's house in the countryside for the duration of the summer, which causes a fight. During this time, we both meet Luke and learn that Clary is super pale and has really bright hair. Why is this picture here? Later, Clary exposits to Simon that she doesn't know anything about her family or their history, as if young people in the 21st century really gave a shit about their lineage. Simon, in turn, comments on a great deal of scarring on Jocelyn's back, which Clary brushes aside rapidly. Simon then asks her to go to a poetry reading, where he intends to confess his deep love to her. Of course, Clarissa is once again oblivious to her friend's advances, as the blonde hunk she had seen murder someone the night before is sitting alone at a table near the back of the venue. Cutting Simon off right before he is going to confess, Clary goes over to the mysterious stranger, who we learn is named Jace. He proceeds to info dump about the magical world hidden in plain sight to the Shadowhunters, who refer to themselves as Nephilim, not that kind, and that since Clary can see him, she obviously has, quote, the sight, and isn't a, quote, Mundi, short for mundane, a derogatory term used to describe ordinary humans. Obviously skeptical, any questions Clary has quickly leave her mind as she receives a worrying call from her mother. Jocelyn tells her daughter not to come home and to tell Luke that a mysterious he has found her before the call cuts off abruptly. Once again showing a complete disregard for her own safety, Clary rushes back to a conspicuously trashed and empty home, only to get jumped by a giant centipede with the upper half of a human face and one of the Forsaken. No, not that kind. Luckily for her, Jace follows her home and is able to save her. He does this by doodling on her arm with this universe's equivalent of a magic wand, called Estelle, and transporting her to, quote, the Institute. Once there, we are reintroduced to Jace's cohorts and adoptive siblings, Alec and Isabel Lightwood, along with their tutor, Hodge. Here, we also learn that only people with Nephilim blood can be marked with Estelle and survive, thus proving that Clary is one. After things have calmed down some, Jace and Clary return to her apartment complex, real smart cookies these two, and meet Madame Dorothea, a neighbor who works as a fortune teller operating as an underground magical halfway house and general store. The pair use the Madame's magic portal to try and find Jocelyn, but are instead transported to Luke's bookshop, which doubles as his primary residence. Here they run into Simon, who was looking for Clairo. Clairo. I swear to God. Here they run into Simon, who was looking for Clary, commit a B&E, and eavesdrop on a conversation Luke has with some former associates, Pangborn and Blackwell, who were sent by Valentine in search of the Mortal Cup. They are dismissed by Luke, who claims ignorance and refuses to get involved. Simon weasels his way into going to the Institute, much to the annoyance of Jace, and the three of them tell Hodge what they learned. It is at this point that we get some context for what's been going on in the plot, and hold on, cause it's kinda wild. So, a little over 20 years ago, roughly in 1985, in the Shadowhunter homeland of Idris, Valentine formed an organization called the Circle, of which, among others, Jocelyn, Hodge, the Lightwoods, Jace's father Michael Wayland,
Psycho Mantis,
and Luke, who was the Parabatai or Oath brother to Valentine, were members. The goal of said organization was, and get this, the complete and total genocide of all quote-unquote downworlders, i.e. all innately magical creatures besides Nephilim. We're talking werewolves, we're talking warlocks, we're talking vampires and fairies, and anything else you can think of. I'm going to give this revelation the exact same weight the book gives it by brushing past it and moving to the next plot point. Clary and Jace visit the Silent City, sometimes referred to as the City of Bones.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
To speak to the Silent Brothers. Here they learn Clary has a magical blockade in her mind supposed to prevent her from remembering or even noticing pretty much anything magical. In order to investigate further, they'll have to talk to a high-level warlock. Luckily, Isabel has an invitation to a party hosted by the High Warlock of Brooklyn, cause she's in the know, you know? At the party, Magnus explains that he was the one to put the block in Clary's mind, at the request of Jocelyn, and that it needed to be reinforced every 2 years, lest it begin to fall apart. The three of them actually had an appointment scheduled for just a few days prior, but Jocelyn had disappeared and Magnus dared not approach Clary alone. Elsewhere in the apartment, some sequel-baity stuff is set up. Magnus, a 400-year-old immortal half-demon, and Alec, a 17-year-old boy, have a meet-cute. And Isabel hits it off with Simon, who is there. 'Cause why not? It's not like this whole secret magical world is a secret or anything. In fact, Simon being at this party at all results in what feels like a superfluous plot detour, if I'm being polite. A less kind person would call it some of the most on-the-nose sequel bait of the lot. The boy drinks a magic potion, gets turned into a rat, and is then accidentally kidnapped by drunk, without saying so out loud, vampires, thus forcing Clary and Jace to go on a rescue mission. Here, we meet Rafael Santiago, head of the Vampire Enclave in New York. Our heroes rescue a visibly rattled Simon and return him to human form. Back at the Institute, Clary and Jace share a romantic smooch on the roof to celebrate her 16th birthday. Did I not mention she was 15 before? Did I mention Jace was 17? Whatever. This is where the story begins, what I like to call the parade of twists. Let's go! Clary remembers that she has actually seen the Mortal Cup before, hidden inside one of Madame Dorothea's tarot cards. She and the gang go to the fortune teller's apartment to retrieve the cup. But it turns out that Madame Dorothea was actually the demon Abaddon in disguise, who had been tasked by Valentine to find the cup. Simon rolls a nat 20 on a dex check, and is able to banish the demon by shooting out a skylight with a bow and arrow. The gang goes back to the Institute with the cup, but it turns out that Hodge was actually working for Valentine all along and had been tasked with finding the cup, which he steals and teleports away, along with a kidnapped Jace. Clary gives pursuit until Hodge reverse pursues her and tries to shank her in an alley. At the last moment, she is saved by Luke, but it turns out that he was actually a werewolf all along and has taken over the New York pack in order to fight Valentine and save a captive Jocelyn. They all go to Valentine's lair, but it turns out that Valentine has an army of Forsaken, making the werewolf army necessary while simultaneously sidelining them 3 seconds after being introduced. Clary finds her mother, but it turns out that she has been placed into a magically induced coma. Luke ganks Pangborn and Blackwell, while Clary definitely cares about her own safety and well-being. Frey goes to fight Demon Hunter Hitler on her own. Clary walks upstairs, and we are introduced to both a character and a twist that are absolutely bonkers. So, for any astute viewers, it should be pretty obvious by now that Valentine is Clary's dad. I honestly can't remember if this was brought up earlier in the narrative, and I don't have a physical copy on hand, so I'll just confirm it here. That's fine. Okay. However, it turns out that Jace Wayland was actually raised by Valentine, who, for 8 years, was impersonating Michael Wayland before faking his own death and going into super secret hiding. And it turns out that Jace's real name is Jonathan Christopher Morgenstern, making him Valentine and Jocelyn's firstborn son and Clary's older brother. There's just so much to unpack here, and it only gets worse as the series progresses. Suffice it to say, things get really weird really quickly. Valentine's great, by the way. He takes his time to chew up the scenery and even has Jace halfway convinced to shack up with him again until he starts criticizing Jocelyn and threatening Clary. At that point, Jace is like, nah bro, don't be like that about my sister, and Valentine is like, why don't you say that to my face, bitch, post up. And Jace is like, maybe I will, and Valentine is like, maybe you won't, and then Valentine wins the argument because Jace will, in fact, won't. So Valentine essentially calls Jace a nerd for not being able to kill his own father before hopping through a magic mirror, mortal cup in tow, leaving everyone else behind in a befuddled, wary, and confused mess. Clary and Jace most of all. You know, because of the whole sibling thing. And then it ends. There's some falling action stuff that lasts a couple of pages, but this is essentially it. I hope you're confused as I was when first reading this.
Clary, wow, you look different.
One of the things that fascinates me about this book is that despite being on the New York Times bestseller list, predating The Hunger Games by almost a year and Divergent by a whole 4, it never really achieved the same level of fame as its contemporaries. It received a mediocre film adaptation in 2013 starring the likes of Robert Sheehan, amid Game of Thrones Lena Headey, post-Mad Men Jared Harris, and a forgettable television series titled Shadowhunters on Freeform, which aired from 2016 to 2020, 2 years after the 6th novel was released and well after any buzz for the series had faded into the background. Which is a shame. Despite having riffed quite a bit on this story, I genuinely believe there's 3/4 of a decently exciting, if formulaic, teen adventure story in this novel. Unfortunately, it's retroactively made worse by an oddly approached third act twist that functions as the inciting incident for the rest of the series. I'm speaking frankly when I say that a majority of this series deals with the forbidden romance conflict between two characters who are biologically related. It gets wild, it gets trashy, it wears the reader down until by the end of it you start just rolling with it to see how whack this ride can get. I'll get into this more when talking about the second book and also the third, but suffice it to say that the author frames their relationship as a good thing, and that's problematic. That's not to say you shouldn't read this book or the series at large. It's light, it's fun, and it's very stupid. If you're into reality television, you'll probably like this. If you like trashy rom-coms, you probably will too. Hell, I would probably say this would be a good read for kids about a year into high school. Below that, I would recommend not, but at the same time, I can't control what you do. All in all, I'm gonna give it a everything I just said in the previous 2 paragraphs out of 10. I don't have a rating system up yet, so take that to mean what you will. If you like what we do here, please feel free to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Alternatively, if you feel like we here at I Am Tuesday are hack frauds who should shut up and don't know anything about literature, feel free to tell us in the comments. Anyways, I hope to see you next time, and as always, it is Tuesday, I am Tuesday, and I hope you have a wonderful day.